bond election under the adopted bond decision framework. Mr. Van Eno, are you going to do anything, or?
Morning, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, committee members, Van Eno, Chief Financial Officer. Should have received a memorandum from staff on Friday that backup provides responsive information council resolution directing the staff to do some analysis and work related to a prospective 2026 bond election. So we posted that information for your review. This is listed as a discussion item. Staff from both the Financial Services Department and Capital Delivery Services Department are here to participate in the conversation and answer any questions you might have.
Fair enough. Thank you. Members, this is posted only as a discussion item. If you recall, and Mr. Van Eno, please stop me if I say something wrong. I'm sure a council member will if I say it wrong. But the memo laid out that the professional staff continues to recommend that we not have a bond election in 2026, but that it be held in 2028. And even with the changes that were made in the bond decision framework or decision tree, we would not be fully in compliance with that decision tree if we were to go forward in 2026.
That is correct for the totality of the $390 million scenario staff was asked to look.
Thank you. I'll just say for the record, I continue to take the position I've taken and formally indicated in the past that we should wait and have a bond election in 2028. I feel even more strongly about that now that we have had a draft budget put out by the city manager and the impact that that would have on the typical taxpayer. Any further discussion? Councilmember Duchin?
I just have a question for staff. I appreciate the memo that was shared on Friday. It talks about, at the end of that memo, the interim funding that staff is exploring that looks like it's setting a cap of about $150 million in that proposal. That would be divided between, I believe, Parks, Watershed, and TPW. When can we expect sort of a more final proposal or understanding of what that interim option would look like, what the breakdown is between those three groups?
We could certainly provide that pretty quickly.
Good morning, council members. Adriana Castañeda, Director of Capital Delivery Services. The three departments that we're going to be considering is Transportation, Public Works, Watershed Protection, Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation is approximately $75 million. Transportation, Public Works is about $34 million. And Watershed Protection is between $41 and $43 million. We're working with the departments to put the list together. So hopefully by tomorrow during the work session, we can share more detail about those $150 million.
Okay, thank you. That's all I needed. I look forward to what you can share tomorrow.
Councilmember Alter?
Mr. Van Eno, can you share with us again just the tax implication? I know you grouped them together, but for the bond package, the average taxpayer, once fully implemented, what would be the cost to the average taxpayer?
Sure. So for the $390 million package that we looked at, there's two components to it. Is once the full $390 million of bonds are issued, and we're paying debt service on that, we estimate that amount to be $56.73. And then when those projects are implemented, there's also an operations and maintenance cost, an ongoing cost associated with certain of those projects. We estimate that impact at roughly $24.40 for the average taxpayer. So in total, the $81.13 that's mentioned in the memorandum.
Okay. Well, as we move towards our discussion on Thursday, I don't think it's any secret how I want to see these investments for our community, especially for our parks. I do think seeing the impacts that we are seeing in the proposed budget as it relates to cost, I want to weigh that against the benefits and really decide if now is the right time to be asking this of people if people can afford it. And so I think that is what we need to continue to look at as we decide if this is the right move.
Thanks, Councilmember. Councilmember Lane?
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions. As I'm looking at the bond decision framework, and I think about our compliance with it, it would be helpful to me to understand how and why the $50 million parkland acquisition is in the $390 million proposal.
Which, can you say again, which piece? I didn't quite hear you.
Within the $390 million proposal, in the citywide investment section, there is $50 million for parkland acquisition. And I'd like to better understand why it is there. I didn't see mention of it in the memo, the reasoning for that. And I'm asking, as I am thinking about compliance with this bond decision framework.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question. I'm reviewing the memo. We have staff here from CDS to help with those as well, but I see the parkland acquisition is listed as part of the $390 million. Staff has identified about $300 million of that in being in compliance with the financial policies, including parkland acquisition. That's on page 4 near the top of the memo.
Good morning. Marcus Hammer, Assistant Director, Capital Delivery Services. So as part of the $390 million package, when we originally looked at that, we did not take into account the 90% new policy change. So as we're going through and looking at that, those would not kind of be broken out under from a proposition to category like that. So from a parks perspective, this was just sort of their recommendation if we're looking at a comprehensive 6-year program of how that could be kind of put out there and what would keep them moving forward and advancing park acquisition for what their future build-out would look like.
Okay, and from reading the memo, and I was about to clarify that was the only hint I got, was that parkland acquisition funding has already been depleted past 90%. But it sounds like there hasn't been consideration of the strategic need for this acquisition to happen right now versus in 2028. Are there any other factors that are at play in the inclusion of that? And I can also explain why I'm putting it that way. But
So they do have a strategy built out on how they want to look at procuring land and kind of moving forward with what they're doing with that. There are some additional dollars that council approved, I believe a couple of years ago. It was roughly $50 million of CFOs that were put out there. So there's a strategy in how they're looking at each one of those scenarios and kind of what they're looking at to purchase. So, but there is, yes.
okay, so this, so we're following the strategic plan where we are re-upping the account that will be used for this type of acquisition because it's been depleted. And this actually relates to one of my broader concerns about even the $390 million proposal. There are various, within the bond decision framework, there are various elements to look at when considering whether this is an urgent enough need to bypass some of the areas where there isn't compliance. And so that's why I'm looking at everything in here on that basis. And so, personally, and I'm happy to discuss this more offline if follow-up is helpful, don't need to if it's not, in looking at the current financial conditions and the real estate market, I believe that any land that has a highest and best use of parkland is currently in a downward trajectory as far as value goes. And so even though that account is 90% depleted, it would be a financial mistake. I mean, if I'm right about that, it would be a financial, but I think a lot of people would agree with me, but we'll see. If I'm right about that, it would actually be a financial mistake to follow the strategic plan almost blindly because we want to advance these things. We would be better off if we postponed until 2028, $50 million of parkland acquisition, as long as there's a mechanism for the unique circumstances which do arise with real estate and property and all, for individual unique instances where it is appropriate and necessary to buy parkland sooner. But I think we could, I think we could handle that type of situation with COs, if I'm correct about that. That's correct? Okay. Thank you. So fundamentally, when I look at this $390 million bond proposal, I see a lot of very large items that appear to be in the estimate based on moving strategic plans forward and bond sequencing forward in ways that have not been updated strategically since COVID, since redistricting, since the substantial population growth that has occurred in my district and in the Williamson County part of Austin, and certainly other parts of Austin as well. And so, and in addition to that, I understand that there are, well, we've placed a strong, I support the concept, and we've placed a strong priority on only including in this estimate projects that can be constructed within 6 years. Absolutely important to get on track with that bond cycle. But I am concerned that, you know, as I look, for example, at needs in my district that haven't been addressed since annexation decades and decades ago, infrastructure needs, definitely capital improvement needs, capital improvement planning, that almost none of that has made it into the District 6 recommendation, despite the longstanding need. And so for me, that raises concern. There are already some red X's where we don't meet the bond decision framework. But for me, that also raises concern. And under project delivery, the third bullet item, proposed projects are equitably distributed across the city, taking into consideration disparate needs and historical investments. So as you all have, my colleagues on the dais and many of you staff in the audience have heard for over a year and a half now, I am concerned that the city's strategic plans have neglected very real needs in my district for a very long time. I am concerned at the challenge that we seem to have in moving those longstanding needs into capital expenditure planning for the city. And when I look at the proposal that is before me, District 6, just the total allocation for District 6 is less than $7 million. If you go through everything, all in, parks, libraries, pools, the list goes on, right? Despite many, many deferred investments and if you go through this proposal, there are many, many individual line items that are greater than that, 2 times that, 3 times that. And my concern is if we haven't taken sufficient look at the gaps in our strategic plans, the changes that have occurred in the last 5 to 10 years as far as growth patterns, demographics, vulnerable populations, the recent mapping GIS application, I guess, that came out regarding levers of economic mobility, even produced by the city of Austin, identifies my district as an area with worsening conditions as it relates to that, much along the lines that I've been talking about since I've been in office. So my question is, I don't know who did the checks and X's, but I would love to know why we've got a check instead of an X for that item on this bond decision framework. If possible, I can take it as follow-up if it's not readily available information.
I think staff would follow up with you
That sounds good.
on that
sounds good.
particular item. I mean, there are a lot of different considerations in the framework, and so trying to strike that balance is
Sure, I'm happy to handle that and follow up. No problem at all. But, you know, and as I've listed off needs that are unmet, that are significant, that are longstanding, I also think about a broader need for our city.
It is important, and one of the reasons that I ran for office is that, and I know I've heard y'all speak to this, everyone up here. It is important that Austin is a shining beacon of hope in the state and in this country, and I want to be a part of that. And that relates to fundamental human rights. It relates to prioritization of life and safety and feelings of safety within our city, and many, many other things. The services provided by our our nonprofit social services contractors. But it also relates to the way that we invest in this city, in our people, in our geography that we may not have reached previously. And as is no secret, my district is very likely to vote against this bond especially the way that it is currently composed, by overwhelming margins. And I, as their representative, would agree with that vote as it stands right now. But the reason that my district has never reelected a city council member, the reason that it's so easy to get my district against a bond, is because we, in that geography, including myself, have largely lost hope that the city sees the very real needs on the ground, the many low-income families that have moved from Central Austin into my district, near Lakeline Station, and other places. We've lost hope that the city will actually invest in us. And despite, as you all know, have seen, my loud and persistent voice on this matter, I see before me a staff proposal that is intended to target the most important needs that cannot wait. And if it passes, transportation, public works, parks, libraries, aquatics, all this, we're probably not going to see anything new for a decade. So it is that much more dramatic, the misses, as it relates to my district. Now, the final point on this that is quite significant, and it goes back to, we need to be, as a city, a shining beacon of hope. Everyone in our city, if the Central Austin is the heart and soul of our city, the blood needs to flow out and it needs to flow back, or parts of our city die. That is the reality of my district for too long, in my opinion. But we also need to provide a vision. And so when I look at longstanding needs, there is great opportunity for new partnerships to strengthen relationships that will lead to substantial other sources of funding. And many of these longstanding needs, if taken in totality, can become a vision that my district and the city can grasp. And so I respectfully raise the possibility that, as currently laid out, the $390 million proposal does not adequately take into account equitable distribution across the city, taking into consideration disparate needs and historical investments. And I am currently considering some examples of this. I will daylight in public that at our August council meeting, I fully intend to bring forward, and some of you have seen a draft, an IFC relating to development and redevelopment in the area of Lakeline Station. Talk about a visionary goal. I remember the red line period. I know we all do. It was so exciting to see rail stations, transit-oriented development, walkable, bikeable, come to our city. As those years have gone by, Lakeline Station, the red line has been open for 15 years. As the years have gone by, the cuts have come in my district to the point that Lakeline Station is now the only element of Project Connect in my district, the only transit hub that has any connectivity with the rest of the city. There's only one local bus line that goes to my district, and what little bus service there is comes out of Lakeline Station. And yet, the activation of that station has been significantly neglected by the city. It happens to be in Williamson County, 60% of my district. That frequently gets neglected in data analysis, programming, all of that. And in fact, in the $390 million bond proposal, do you know how many dollars are allocated to the 60% of my district that's in Williamson County that includes Lakeline Station, which has a decent little chunk of incomplete pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure that significantly impacts the actual functioning of that station as a transit-oriented development. Do you know how many dollars of the $390 million will be spent in Williamson County?
No, ma'am, not at the moment, but we can get that breakout.
I can share it with you. I mean, and certainly correct me if I turn out to be wrong, but I believe that it's $0. And so when we talk about new partnerships and being more effective, Williamson County is investing a fair amount of money in the areas that the neighborhoods in my district. They passed a bond. They're doing road work. They're adding active transportation lanes. They're doing things that the city of Austin likes to be a leader in. They're in discussions. I'm on Campo, and I have other discussions with stakeholders from Williamson County who care very much about active transportation and improved connectivity in the Williamson County part of Austin. And one of those conversations in the last month really hit a nerve for me, and I hope it does for you all. They said, the city of Austin does some amazing work on urban trails, active transportation. When I go into Austin, I see it. All we want is for some of that to come to Williamson County, and we'll work with you on it. And so I know that I am not alone on this dais in terms of having reservations about passing a bond. However, I think that many of my concerns are shared with other colleagues, but this one in particular, I don't believe has been elevated. And so I would invite consideration as we consider a bond now or in 28 of ensuring that we're actually investing in parts of our city where we are likely to find funding partners who have not come to the table with us yet, and prioritizing that. And in particular, realizing the visions of the past that haven't been fulfilled. Lakeline Station, transit-oriented development. Old Spicewood Springs Road between 360 and Old Lampasas Trail. We have been assembling as a city land and easements to have a connected trail that is safe for people to access on foot or bike since 1971. We have not put enough of this bond money into that. That could be a crown jewel of our district. So I know that was long. I hope it was helpful. I'm sure that it's evident that I am currently a no on this proposal, and for reasons that go beyond what I've just said. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a yes, and very supportive in particular of the Parks bond right now. It's been, if we have an election in November for Parks, it will have been 8 years since our last Parks bond. If we wait till 28, obviously it's 10 years since our last Parks bond. We can't wait that long between capital improvements and injections into our park system, especially given the limitations that the legislature put on the parkland dedication fees, and we've lost sources of revenue for capital projects in parks. We really need to go back. I want to be very conscious of what we build in the parks bond, and I want to be very conscious of maintenance costs with prioritization given to things that will not significantly increase maintenance and operating costs. But I do think it's absolutely critical that we move forward with a parks bond in November of 2026. And to your comments, Councilmember Lane, specifically on the parkland acquisition, I think that is probably a place where we could trim. I'm more interested in investing in capital in existing parks than acquiring land that we don't have capital to develop that land anyway. We already have a lot of land that is wants to be a park, will someday be a park, but right now it's just kind of undeveloped land that has some benefits, but I'd really rather put actual physical capital infrastructure into our existing parks. And just on the kind of the politics, again, I know everyone's talking about 2028, it's the presidential year, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's a lot of uncertainty for November 2026. That said, there's more certainty. I think we know more or less what the dynamics, the economy, the kind of global situation will be in the next 4 months than we know what it will be in November of 2028. And that concerns me. I think putting all our eggs in one basket and saying that we're going to put a huge bond, because it would have to be huge at this point, because if we don't do it in 2028, then we'll have been really, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years for some departments without any kind of capital needs. That's going to have to be a very large bond, and I'm uncomfortable with that. My sense would be that if we could get a parks bond kind of out of the way, I think that helps pave the way for some of the transportation dollars that we're probably going to need, for some of the watershed dollars that we're probably going to need in 2028. So I just wanted to make those comments. Again, I continue to be a strong supporter of a parks bond in particular in November of 26.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks, committee. Unless there's further discussion on this item, we'll go on to item number 5.